we're live.
We are live. Hey, evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Howdy.
Another In the First. Tonight, I'm Jim Weldon, by the way.
Yep,
I
I'm Chris.
have been, always.
And I'm Chris Baronio.
Rob Close.
And with us tonight we have,
Nandi Randolph,
Yeah,
and you are with the
the Delaware Family Policy Council.
awesome.
there
Thanks
you
for
go.
joining us. This is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Oh,
And
yeah, thank you very much.
Glad I could be here.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on, and as we had spoken before, we may need you to be a repeat guest with all the things that are going on if you were up to it.
Yeah, there's quite a bit happening, so I'm sure that I won't be able to cram everything in tonight.
Probably not. Probably
Right.
not.
We'll see how this goes if she
Yeah.
even wants to come back.
Well, hopefully, I mean, we did have one repeat person come back.
Oh,
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
for four sessions.
There you
Yeah.
go. That was a heavy hitter.
It was a heavy hitter.
So Jim, what day is today?
Today is Saturday, and it is tax. I mean, sorry, it is
Whoa.
Tuesday, tax day. Tax day.
That is right. April
If
15th, tax
You
day.
Have until midnight tonight.
Yeah, I wonder if post offices are still open if you need to.
They
go
used to do
stamp-
that. I don't
go
know.
stamp
I
something.
mean,
what-
There
What are
probably is
taxes?
somewhere.
We have to pay taxes? What?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny
well,
you mentioned taxes.
Some do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Funny about taxes in Delaware.
Yeah, so here we are, tax-free state. Well, that's what sales tax, I will say.
Yeah,
Right. And,
not property tax.
not property tax, not
And
school tax,
certainly not
not
income,
income
tax.
tax.
Right.
not gross receipts
Not
tax.
gross receipts. Right.
So, yeah,
Transfer
what's
on?
tax.
yeah, Governor, transfer tax when you buy or sell a house.
Yep.
Yeah, Governor Meyer did his State of the State address. Was that last week?
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's been a lot of discussion about the state of Delaware's revenue and also our expenses. And it seems like we like spending more money than we bring in.
No way.
Yeah, we do.
Governments can do that?
And what's great about it is he's planning to spend even more money.
Why
next
not?
year. Yeah,
It's worked out so well for the federal government. Why shouldn't states?
that's correct. So our income is going up about 2%. Our spending's going up about 7%. The solution to that is let's burn through our rainy day fund, about $480 million.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is a theme in the news right now. Government spending too much.
Too much,
How
yeah.
about that?
And the answer to that is we just need to raise taxes.
Of course.
So he's already talking about raising income taxes. So there's already a bill out there that's going to set 2 or 3 new income tiers and increases. They're talking about raising fees at DMV and DelDOT,
Oh, yeah.
gas tax.
Sure.
Yep, fees at state parks. Trying to remember what else was on there, but yeah, it was a whole slew of them.
Yeah.
Yep.
So was it 6125, 250, something like that?
Yeah, right now, if you earn 60,000 or more, you're at 6%. Doesn't matter if you're at 60,000 or 60 million, you're at 6%.
Right.
And then they're talking about another tax bracket at 120,000 and another tax bracket at 250, I believe.
And I believe if you're 250 or more, it's going to be about a 0.5% increase, I think. Is that-
Yeah, roughly some.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which-
closer to 7%, I think.
Yeah. Closer to 7%. How about that?
And I think the 120 is probably the more, I'll say, interesting or concerning, because a lot of people are like, "Wow, you're making 120,000. That's a lot of money." So
Oh, of
yeah, sure,
course.
you can pay another, 0.25%.
Mm-hmm.
But if you stop and think about it, a family where a married couple, they're both teachers,
Yes.
they're probably making 120,000.
They are definitely making more than
Right.
120.
And maybe they have some investments. Maybe they have a side hustle or whatever. They're
Mhm.
going to be paying more in taxes.
How about if you're a small businessman, small
Absolutely.
businesswoman?
Absolutely. Small
You'll-
business owner.
You'll be maybe even up to the 250 and above.
Right.
And they can certainly afford it, right?
Absolutely they can.
Yeah,
According to Governor Meyer.
Yeah.
I just look- I
worry.
just
Once
look at it
they-
and
once
say-
they get this problem solved, they'll lower the taxes.
No,
in the
it
future,
won't happen.
right?
It never does
Right.
happen. So, well, you got to
Yep.
remember, this is good for the economy of the state because about a third of the people who are employed in the state are employed by the state, and so we certainly want to have more money to be able to keep employing a third of the Delaware workforce as government employees.
Right. It's
Who don't
amazing. It's amazing.
produce
Yeah.
Anything other than a service, no product.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
It'll be
it is.
interesting to see
I
how it
think we
plays
beat
out.
that one to death. What else
Yeah.
is going on in the world?
Well, on Saturday when we recorded our last podcast, we were
It's a
talking about.
film.
Right.
That's true.
It is film.
We were talking about Iran, and Trump administration was negotiating with Iran about future of their nuclear weapons program, and allegedly it was, I'd say, a good faith start to the discussion.
Yeah, it went well. Went well.
Yeah, and then there's like that whole phrase about what is it? Speak softly, carry a big stick.
Mhm.
So the Navy just moved a second aircraft carrier
Teddy
strike
Roosevelt.
group
Teddy Roosevelt,
into
by the
the
way.
into the Persian Gulf, which makes for
It does.
tight quarters when you're driving around a battle group.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see what influence that might have on the discussion.
Have you ever been associated with a battle group?
Yeah, I have.
I
Yeah.
those you have.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
lifetime ago.
Yeah, lifetime ago.
But
you
back
were,
in the 90s, I was with the JFK battle group in the Persian Gulf.
Mhm.
Kind of a different time in the world.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird to think back on that.
It
but
is.
Yeah.
But you had more room underwater, didn't you?
No,
Oh,
a
okay.
lot less water, or a lot less room. So,
All
yeah,
right.
that's a whole other podcast. But
Yeah, it is. It
Anyway,
is.
so we'll bring it back to our special guest this evening.
Yes. So, how the heck are you?
I am busy, as you can imagine.
Yes, we can
this-
imagine that.
In the heat of the legislative session right now.
Right.
So there's quite a bit happening.
So, how did you get involved in doing what you're doing?
That is a great question, and one I honestly don't get asked very often. I graduated in 2012 with my bachelor's in biology education, and I was actually a teacher.
Really?
Oh, okay.
I taught honors in AP biology and physics, and I loved my classroom, loved my kids, but that was around the era that Common Core started to get passed down. And it was extremely frustrating, some of the things that we were being forced to do. And thankfully, I had a really great administration that gave me a lot of liberty in the classroom. My kids were some of the highest scoring in the county. I was in Florida at the time. And quite honestly, it was just because I was not teaching Common Core. I was just teaching them the information. Imagine
You
that.
rebel.
Do
You.
you want to just give a real light overview, Common Core? I'm sure everybody's
Yeah.
heard of it, but we'll just, what was it before Common Core, and then now Common Core came down from Fed.
Yeah. So Common Core was a specific program, just kind of dictated exactly how education would be taught. It changed reading and science and math standards, and those standards broadened even the grading system, if you will. That was a huge part of it. So we were told to not fail children. It was either mastery or non-mastery. They were to get the same test if they failed it. If they didn't master it, they had to repeat that same test over and over and over.
So this was pushed down by the federal government, tied to funding for schools,
Correct.
and required a lot of testing. Right?
Absolutely.
Just
And we were being
for
tested.
measuring.
Our kids were being tested for things that they couldn't even explain to us what the tests were for.
Mm.
We'd walk in on a regular Tuesday thinking that, I've got my lesson plans for the day. And they'd say, oh, your third block is going to go to test. And only third block, not the rest. So it just mixed up so many things, and it was quite frustrating, honestly.
Right.
But it was that frustration that kind of propelled me to stop just whining about the policies, and I wanted to get more involved in the policy process. And that shifted me to working with the Florida Family Policy Council. So if you're not aware, Delaware is not the only one that has an FPC, but we're actually a part of a movement that was started by Dr. James Dobson a few decades ago. If you're familiar with Dr. Dobson, he has a lot to do with the family, focus on the family. He did radio spots and just a lot of information to embolden and encourage and equip families. And as he was doing all that, he knew that families needed to be protected from policy as well. So he started the Family Policy Councils. There's about 41 of us across the country now.
Wow.
And we actually have one in New Zealand as well. So,
Really? Oh, that's good.
That's cool.
Now, would that be by state, or can you just have a region have one?
it's by state.
By state, okay.
Now, not every state has one.
Right.
But like I said, there's about 41 of us
Mhm.
now. And we do operate autonomously. So if you're familiar with the federal and state system, the state FPCs almost act like a state.
Okay.
So we all do have some very similar things that we all kind of take in. We have the same overall groundwork, but we work autonomously. We all have our own directors, president, etc.
Very good. So how did you end up in Delaware?
So I was, like I said, I was working with the Florida Family Policy Council, and then I actually moved to Texas for a bit. I was with my dad there. He's a veteran, disabled veteran there, and while I was there, I had already met Nicole Tice, who is the director of the Delaware Family Policy Council,
Mhm.
and she reached out and said, "Hey, I heard you're not in Florida anymore. Do you want to come hang out in Delaware?" And as any normal person, I said, "Delaware."
Yeah, right.
But that kind of started the conversation, and I came up here for a couple of weeks just to kind of check out, and I really was feeling like this was the next place where I needed to be. So
Oh, very good.
That's very cool. And around what time frame was that?
that was 2019. So
Okay. Been here
Just-
6-ish years.
just hit
Yeah.
6 years in March.
All right.
There you are.
Awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So do you have like a staff, or how does that operate?
Yes, we have a relatively small team, but we get quite a lot done. Our 3 main pillars are rebuilding, advocating, and cultivating. Rebuilding a culture of life, marriage, family, and religious freedom by advocating for it through stewardship of government and public policy, and then cultivating effective and courageous leaders. So we all kind of move with that mantra, and all of our roles look a little bit differently, but we do have a very tight-knit team.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And your title in the family policy council?
I'm the policy analyst.
Right. Okay. Very good.
What does that entail? Like, what do you spend your days doing?
A huge part of my days is reading through the legislation, sorting through all of the pieces that will affect the family positively or negatively. Again, we focus on that life, marriage, family, and religious freedom piece. So looking for how those will be affected by legislation coming down, connecting with legislators to either lobby them for or against a bill, distilling down the information so that it's a little bit more easy to understand. Some of these bills that we see come out are pages upon pages upon pages, and the average person just doesn't have time to read that. So I spend a lot of my time doing the reading for that.
Okay.
Wow.
And then when you do your analysis, how is it that the council makes the decision that this is, not a good piece of legislation, or this is a good piece of legislation? How does that process work?
So the process will go, it starts with me kind of looking at the legislation as is, and then connecting it to Del Code. How does this affect some of the laws that are currently in place? Because quite honestly, there are some bills that may seem docile, but because of codes that we already have in place, there becomes a domino effect that this new addition turns it into a ticking time bomb.
Right.
So comparing it with current Del Code, also, of course, the Constitution. Imagine legislators were to read that. That'd be fantastic if they did that for me.
Oh, I'm sorry, the what?
If the legislators already read it.
You read what? The Constitution? Is
What?
that important? It feels like in Delaware, like, yeah, we
Apparently.
can skip that thing.
Oh, well,
Yeah, pass some more
isn't
laws.
that kind of like the way the Democrats have operated? We're just, hey, we don't care about it. We're just going to pass it and see what happens.
That was it.
Or
That was a
quote
quote.
it completely incorrectly. And I just cringe in my seat as I hear them misquote it.
Right.
But so I compare it with that. I work with some of our attorneys. We connect very closely with the Alliance Defending Freedom. And just to check and see if there's anything that I'm missing, any sort of legal additional piece that, is problematic. And then we go from there.
Okay. So then when you have determined that there's a piece of legislation that you're either, in favor of or that you're concerned about, you talk to the legislators and try to help them. That in a sense, are you a lobbyist or not a lobbyist?
I am officially a
Yeah, right.
lobbyist, yes.
And so the benefit of lobbyists is that legislators need lobbyists to come in and present positions that they're just not sure about, and it helps them understand. So that's kind of like what you do then. Is there anything more other than talking to the legislators that you do?
Yeah, so outside of talking to the legislators, I also talk to different people that we can have as expert witnesses. So to help the legislators have people to either stand as expert or even to be just part of the public, because a lot of times the public is simply not aware of what's happening.
Yes.
So a large part of what I do is writing and connecting directly with our base so that they know what's happening, know when to come to Legislative Hall to be able to provide comment and help them through the process. A lot of people don't know exactly how to provide public comment. Sometimes that's intimidating if you've never done it before. So helping them through that process is another huge piece.
So how do you communicate to people that this is what we're trying to do?
Well, if they're on our email list, and they'd be on that list if they went to delawarefamilies.org/updates. If they went on our email list, then they would get all of the alerts that come out every time that there's a new bill. On that site, they're also able to see some of the bills that we're tracking, and a small little synopsis on what that bill does, how it would affect them, and also how to connect with their legislator on the bill. So, yes, we connect usually through our email alerts.
Okay.
And if I can hit that one again, it was DelawareFamilies.org
/updates.
/updates.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, and I'm very poorly sharing it with people. It's
Okay.
zoomed in on the URL, so you can see that I need
Good,
to change
good.
this source.
DelawareFamilies.org
Yes.
Thank you.
/updates.
Yep.
Yep. Get on there and sign up for email updates.
Exactly. And are there any organizations that you partner with?
Well, in Delaware, we have partners like the Delaware Right to Life. But then on a national scale, we have Americans United for Life. We're connected with the Patients' Rights Action Fund, Alliance Defending Freedom. We're part of their network, as I mentioned, the Heritage Foundation, Family Research Council. We have quite a large network of individuals that we work with in one way or another.
Do you ever do any work with the Caesar Rodney Institute?
Yes, we have actually.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Yeah, I call them Delaware's Heritage Foundation, right? Yeah. So, okay. So you take a look at legislation. You interact with a number of groups. You have a email distribution list to alert public that something is going on. You reach out to legislators. You are a lobbyist. You can go down to Dover and talk to the legislators, and you can push the positions of the council, right?
That's the hope.
That's the hope, right?
Unfortunately, they don't always like to talk to me.
And why don't they like to talk to you?
You know,
You're
I
such a
can't
sweet,
imagine
such a
why.
sweet person.
I
Yes.
try to smile all the time.
Yes, yes.
But apparently that's not enough.
I've known you for, I don't know, what, a year now or something like that. I've never seen you not smiling.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
So, so obviously there is some resistance, but
Yes.
I mean, do you get any hostility or just a blanket? I don't know. I don't waste my time.
I can quite honestly say that there's only been one particular instance of hostility that was a bit visual after a hearing.
Okay.
Though a lot of the pushback tends to be more passive aggressive, if you will. Just as an example, members of the public are able to provide their comment and they are not questioned. Not only are they not questioned, their time is not interrupted if they're still in the middle of their time. However, I've been interrupted a few times. I've been questioned a few times in the middle of a hearing.
By members of the General Assembly?
Correct.
Okay.
And I'm looking around like, am I allowed to respond? Because technically this isn't even supposed to happen.
Right.
Yes.
Back to the visual. Was this a hand gesture? Like you said, you were.
Oh, no, it was after a hearing, and there were some choice words.
Ah.
Yes.
Really? Huh. From a member of the General Assembly?
It was a back and forth, and
Who?
they
Care
were
to share?
They were
not?
not very.
Name and shame.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a pretty.
Don't worry, nobody watches this.
I'd say it was a relatively aggressive back and forth.
Okay.
But
Are they still? They're still a representative.
oh, they're still
They're
represented.
still there. Okay. All right. So.
If you had to narrow down, maybe just spell their name.
Like pick a number between 1 and 41.
Yeah, yeah. You mean as far as the House seats?
I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
Okay,
maybe, was it in the House? Maybe it was in the Senate.
Maybe.
So without naming them, you want to share the topic? Maybe what were you?
Yeah, it was a bill regarding adding asexual and pansexual to the definitions for sexual orientation.
Okay.
And my question to the legislature or to the committee within my comments was, where do we stop this line? Because clearly the line
Valid
keeps
question.
moving.
The line is moving, and it is an extremely valid question because
Right.
where do you stop? So
Right. And I brought up what's referred to as MAPs, or minor attracted persons,
Mm-hmm.
which is the euphemism for pedophiles.
Correct.
Yep.
And
Which is a euphemism for a criminal.
right, right, and that's been there's been a fight to turn that into a valid sexual orientation. So my question is, okay, we're adding pansexual today, and you're saying, well, this is necessary, culture is changing, etc. Well, what happens if/when culture changes to fully accept a map?
And there are cultures like that in the world
Right.
currently.
In the
Right.
United States, I believe there
in
are
the United
It's
legislators.
illegal here. There's places where it's not illegal.
Oh,
Yes.
fair point.
Yeah.
But I was going to say there are legislators and legislatures in the United States where they are talking about this.
Right.
Yeah.
So what happens then? Do we also bow to culture at that point and say,
Nope.
well,
That's- I
pedophiles
answered
can be
it.
added to the sexual orientation list that we are saying that we should not discriminate against, right? And so I was reprimanded
Reprimanded.
for such talk,
Right.
And they accused me of calling them a pedophile. And I said, I didn't say you were a pedophile. I mean, if you feel convicted by that word, that's your business. But
Nice.
Nice.
Well done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
He may be. But anyway, what is a pansexual?
you know, these new sexual orientations, I struggle with trying to define them and understand the definitions because the list keeps growing.
Mm-hmm.
But pansexual is any/all. It's a very open sexuality. And asexual is there's no sexual attraction, essentially.
And for some reason, it makes our society better and our laws better to actually have all of these terms explicitly written into the laws.
Well, the argument that they provided was that there are individuals who feel left out of the conversation because their sexuality is not mentioned when, this discrimination code is written.
Yeah.
It only says heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual.
And if you think back to the founding fathers writing a couple brilliant documents, how much sexuality do you think they had in mind as they wrote those?
I think they were only thinking about one.
Yeah.
And it was not
And-
included because
Yeah, I
it
don't. I
seemed
think
like
they were,
common sense.
I think they were
Right.
thinking about none.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
more like people need to have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about
And I don't
sexual orientation in the legislative halls of Philadelphia.
I
think
believe
they
that was the whole
needed to.
point of all those documents was
Right.
not to define what government can do, but to limit
Right.
what government can do.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a limitation, not a
right.
like
Wow.
a set of rules.
Such a
And
radical.
I don't think we've
Yeah.
included these things within legislation as well because it's such a subconscious part of life that you don't even feel the need to write it down because it's just an understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm supposed to be talking to you as another human,
Right.
not about like all these other aspects that are completely outside our review.
right.
Right?
Because
We have
they
a set of
they
laws,
don't
we
matter.
follow them.
Exactly.
So a lot of
Mind blowing.
I'm assuming a lot of what you do, your organization does, is based upon a belief in some type of morality, correct?
Absolutely. We
Okay.
are ultimately a Christian organization,
Okay.
and we focus on legislation from a biblical worldview.
Okay. But if I was Jewish, could I be involved?
Yeah, our group is not just Christians.
Right.
There are people who are connected with us who do not claim to be Christ followers.
Mhm.
Either they are Catholic or some other
Mm-hmm.
faith, or they're just of no faith at all.
Right.
Because, I mean, the laws, the truth of the matter is that truth is objective, right? And what's good for humanity, for human flourishing, is good for all people,
Mhm.
regardless of whatever faith they hold to. Again, we are a Christian worldview organization.
Right,
We don't
sure.
shy away from that. But if people wanted to be a part, to receive our emails, etc., they wouldn't have to.
So I want to get to a point, but I just diverting here for a little bit. So it is interesting that all of your major religions have a basic common tenet, though, correct?
Correct.
It's also interesting that the founding fathers, when they wrote, when Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, one of the people who had great influence on him was Cicero, who was a pagan. But Cicero believed in the natural law, right?
Yes.
And the natural law in many cases is a direct relation to the belief in God, right? Okay, God-given rights, well, natural law. So, whether you're Christian or Buddhist or Hindu or whatever, typically they have a common belief in this aspect, in a sense of a natural law, that there are certain things that are normal and that society should behave and act according to that. And then there are things that are abnormal that should not be fostered, correct?
Correct.
How do you know what abnormal is if you don't know what normal is?
It's completely impossible.
Correct. That's my assumption, is that yes, society has to have some type of a norm, a standard, whatever the belief is, whether it's Hindu or Muslim or Christian or Jewish, there is a commonality in this belief in a higher entity that compels one to act in a certain way to foster an ability of following what that common entity may be, whatever it is. But if you don't have an understanding that this is not normal, you'll never know what normal is. And what I see a lot of this legislation is that it is tearing down that understanding of what normal was.
Yes.
I think you can generalize it even more than that, beyond like a belief in God or whatnot. Just a belief that what you do in this life matters.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things that you can do that are good, and there are things that you can do are bad. And where you get that definition from, I think that's where religion and faith and that context comes into play.
Right.
So
Yeah.
but yeah, ultimately what you do matters, and it's pretty clear to the majority what is right and what is wrong. So
I think that's the thing that's difficult, though, because there are a lot that would sit on opposite side of the issues that also believe that there's right and there's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And they also believe that what you do matters, and that's why they fight for abortion, because they feel like that matters. That is their great cause.
Sure.
And so there is a point where you have to really draw the line of what is right and wrong, and where do we get the definitions for that.
Do you have a sense that as we have changed societally, that there is a less of a value of life?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I would agree with you, yes.
I would say that because there's something called personhood theory, essentially, that says our life is completely separate from our physicality. So what you do with your body doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
That's a complete separate entity situation. So abortion doesn't really matter because, okay, yes, it's a person, which a lot of those that are pro-abortion have conceded that point, that, okay, yes, life begins at conception, wherever you care. I don't care. However, if life doesn't have innate value, then it doesn't really matter, right? Again, assisted suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I feel like I've lost my autonomy and I'm uncomfortable, which pain is number 5 on the list of reasons why people opt for assisted suicide. So it's not just this overwhelming sense of pain.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sense of, I feel like I've lost my value.
Right.
So life is not seen as valuable simply because it's human life. It's valuable because of what a person can do, or how old that person is, right? Whether they have passed the birth canal or not.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than just recognizing life is valuable simply because it is human life, Christians would say it's the imago Dei, having the image of God itself is what gives us value, not the fact that I've already been born or the fact that I can walk around, that I have my faculties. That's not what gives me value.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned I call it the physician-assisted suicide, House
Correct.
Bill 140, right? And I'm assuming that the Family Policy Council was in opposition to that?
Absolutely.
Okay. You want to talk a bit, since we were on that topic, you want to hit that?
Yeah, that's a bill that we have been opposing ever since it was introduced in the legislature.
Can you give people a sense of when that was introduced?
It has been a little over a decade now in Delaware that it's come up every single year. And every year it has died at some point at the House stage. Last year was the first time that it made it to the Senate side,
Right.
which was a big thing. And that first run, it went to vote twice, actually. The first vote, we thought that we were going to be able to kill it. There was one legislator, Senator Hoffner, that decided not to vote. There were several Dems that voted no. Senator Brown, Senator Poore, Senator Mazzavinos. And
They voted no.
correct.
Okay.
And then the entire Republican caucus also voted
No. Right.
So it was kind of at an even stalemate there. With the 10-10, it was going to have to go over to Bethany Hall Long, which we weren't sure exactly where she was going to stand on the issue.
Right.
But at the very last minute, Senator Townsend changed his vote from yes to no so that he could be in the majority, which is a complete procedural move.
It is, because then they can control what happens when they bring it up again.
Exactly. So now it's back on it votes, goes in favor. Carney, vetoes it. So now it's back up again. The legislator that had been heading it up for the last several years has retired. Baumbach is no longer there. But they have been pushing it forward even still. So many issues with the bill. So many lies were said on the floor. Something that's very frustrating that was not accurately represented is just what has been happening in other states like Oregon with assisted suicide. How literally 29% as of last year of the individuals that receive the medication, their ingestion status is unknown, meaning they have no idea what happens to these drugs.
Right.
If they've given it to their next door neighbor, their mother-in-law, nobody knows. And we're just going to let that float in the ether, and that's problematic.
Yeah, we had Dr. Mary McCrossan on.
Episode 17.
Yeah, episode 17. Thank
Real
you.
deep dive.
And she spent some time on that. So
I saw a banner on my way driving up here for this tonight. I hadn't seen it before. Right on 13, just north of Odessa. A big banner out there. Vote yes or big green check mark to end of life options or something.
Right.
I forget exactly what it said, but I knew immediately what it was. And yeah, we went through a whole episode there with Dr. McCrossan, and I started not sure how I felt about it. And by the end of that episode, I made up my mind. So I encourage people to watch it and listen.
yeah, it was a good episode. And she mentioned Oregon and studies that were done and some of the misinformation that was utilized out of that Oregon study.
Yes.
Which I think had probably, according to her, if I'm wrong, correct me, they probably have done the most analysis of the impact of it. Is it?
Yes, they do an annual report that's pretty extensive.
Right.
How long has it been legal? Is that the right term? How long has it been legal in Oregon?
I think this is year 26,
Whoa.
27.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you sharing that. I've heard about Oregon, haven't studied it, I'll admit. Somebody opened my eyes on this issue about medical assistance in dying. Somebody opened my eyes to this topic in Canada. And watched a video, we could probably link it here, about this amputee Canadian Army veteran, Kelsey Sharon? Does this ring a bell? If you're
I think so.
And what she talks about is absolutely frightening. And so the fundamental points that she brings up are the idea that, have you ever seen legislation once passed ever get unpassed? And
No.
once legislation is passed,
rescinded.
it typically gets expanded.
Correct.
And the genie's sort of out of the bottle, and you lose control of how and where.
Christine Gauthier?
Now, it's like Kelsey Sharon. I have the link at home, and I'll get it to you, and we can post it on here. But where I was going with all of this is she's like, yes, this started as like, hey, we're just trying to help sick people at the end of life, give them an option. And now they are literally using this for homeless people, drug addicts. They're talking about expanding it to people down to 12 years old. Well, you're having a hard time at school. You're getting bullied. Well, there's a way out of that. It's just absolutely frightening.
So-
And,
so
and
this
they
is-
brag about the Canadian medical system that I hear a lot of people talk about is like so fantastic, and America ought to move to it. They talk about how much money they're saving
because they're killing
by
everyone.
killing people.
Killing it, right.
Like literally, they're saying,
Yeah.
"Look at this! I was able to kill somebody for a couple $1,000 worth of medicine, rather than having to give them, tens of thousands of dollars worth of cancer treatment or drug rehab, or find them another
Yeah.
house and get them off the street." Frightening.
So the Canadian system is really great until you actually are really ill, and then they come to the United States to get the treatment because they can't get it in Canada.
Yeah.
Right.
So you can just Google it. There's way more than one person that the Canada's solution to various problems with veterans and other people is what they call MAID, medically assisted in dying.
Medical assistance in dying.
So other than
Or, yeah, sorry.
the moral issue about whether you have a belief in God and that God should make this decision and not you, that's one aspect. Is it the slippery slope problem that we have a great concern about? Because, as Chris said, once you pass a piece of legislation, it's never rescinded,
Right.
and it always seems to expand.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's a complete expansion. 11 states have already seen expansions even within the last year or two. Two of them are currently in the middle of lawsuits by Compassionate Choices. And Compassionate Choices is the main lobbying group that comes to Delaware annually to stand for this bill. And they're suing other states for the laws that they have in favor of assisted suicide, saying it's not enough.
Okay.
So
Can you give us a sense, like what's their dog in the fight? Like, why do they care? Why are they so passionate about needing this as many places as possible?
that's a
Compassionate Carers, or whatever that group was.
Compassionate Choices, which used to be the Hemlock Society, by the way.
Okay.
So
That makes sense.
they just fancy death, apparently.
Right. Yeah.
They think that it's an appropriate response. And I'll point out that the main sponsor of HB 140 this year is also sponsoring a bill to create the Office of Suicide Prevention, which is laughable at best.
Yeah. I would, personal note, as a police officer, I've had the opportunity of, not one you want to have, of going to a number of suicides, for instance. And the most painful aspect is the friends and relatives who have to suffer the consequences of it.
Yeah.
So the person that decided to commit suicide, that's a conscious decision they made. I'm not going to judge them, but to me, I think that would be the chicken's way out, right? Trying to face a challenge and not trying to overcome it. But it is that pain that I had to sit down there with relatives, family members, and then having some personal experience with some friends who have committed suicide. It's a real challenge. It's tough for them to have to deal with that.
Right. I mean, the bill is it's riddled with issues.
Right.
Insurance fraud. There's no real way to prove lack of coercion. The best way that you can prove it is by the person themselves, and in most instances, they're already dead.
Right. Yeah, and that was one thing Dr. Crossan mentioned, is that in theory there has to be someone else, but it doesn't even have to be a doctor.
Correct.
It could be anybody who's, that was their conscious decision, and who knows whether that was manipulation or
Right.
whatever. So, all right, what's another? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, so can you summarize for people where this bill stands right now, and maybe what they could do is call to action?
Sure. So the bill is completely past the House, and it is on to the Senate floor Thursday.
Okay.
This Thursday it'll be on the floor. If you go to that website again, DelawareFamilies.org/updates, at the very top you will see all the active campaigns that we have.
Okay.
And they can click on assisted suicide to be able to just get some really quick talking points, and they'll send their message. It'll go straight to all the senators.
Okay. And that's Thursday, April 17th.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Yep.
This is not Saturday today, right?
No, still not, and won't be Saturday 2 days from now either.
Okay, good.
That's unfortunate.
Yes.
Awesome.
All right. What's another big piece of legislation that people ought to be aware of?
SB 100 is a new one. SB 100 is the right to marry, and it would make same-sex marriage a constitutional right, constitutional fundamental right. As a Christian worldview organization, we do believe in marriages between one man and one woman, which it's already legal to have a same-sex union recognized as marriage in the state of Delaware, but this just elevates that. And there's some potential concern for clergy. There's a clause in the bill that's supposed to absolve clergy from having to marry anyone. However, as a constitutional right, it's protected at a much higher level. So there's some iffy parts about that. I'd also bring up EP14, which is the right to privacy amendment. Again, another constitutional amendment. The issue with that is it's very similar to the bill that is set to establish abortion into the Constitution. Right to privacy.
That's a different bill.
It's a different bill, but HB 14 is one that a lot of people are not talking about because right to privacy sounds great.
Oh, sure. We ought to
Right.
all honor our privacy.
We all think privacy is fantastic. However, that clause as it stands is the same clause that was utilized in court cases like Roe v. Wade. It's the phrasing that was used to establish abortion along with other things. So it's not just an innocuous bill that, that means that the government can't listen in our conversations. It's adding abortion to the conversation, to the Constitution in a way that most people won't even recognize.
So how does the right to privacy guarantee abortion? I'm still confused how they try to twist that.
Yeah, so that phrasing was used, again, as I mentioned, Roe v. Wade is probably one of the most famous causes for it, or places you'll see it. But the phrase was used to say that a woman has a right to privacy with her doctor, so that a legislature or the government could not prevent her from having an abortion.
Okay.
So that's how the phrase was attached, that you have the right to your own medical decisions, including abortion. And Roe v. Wade just happens to be one of those big cases.
So I have to ask, does the bill actually talk about the right to privacy for a woman?
It says right to privacy, and if you look down in the synopsis, it mentions abortion and Roe v. Wade is one of the.
Oh, really?
Right.
So it really.
But does it actually talk about women? Like, have we figured out what a woman is?
That's
Because I've seen, isn't that another bill that's
Yes.
in place, which is the gender neutralification, if something like that, of
gender neutralizing Delaware
There you go.
Code.
Gender neutralizing Delaware Code.
right?
Correct.
We need to take women out of it. Yes.
And that's actually on its second leg.
Maybe
to
if you don't mind
generalize the
explaining for
Constitution.
people what that
Yeah.
means.
So a constitutional amendment has to pass by a two-third vote in both chambers for 2 consecutive sessions
In order for it to actually
in order for it to pass.
change the
Correct.
Constitution.
So
right?
the first leg is that first passing of a General Assembly, and then the next General Assembly, which we have a 2-year assembly lifespan, so it doesn't necessarily mean the next calendar year, but the next assembly is the second leg of the bill.
Okay.
So this is its second leg.
Wow.
So
So we are on the way. You do believe that one's going to pass?
Most likely. And I think because of the way that it's written, it's taking out, there's places in the Constitution that'll refer to, so the governor as he, makes his
Slash
cabinet.
C or
Correct.
Yeah.
So they're removing that to say as the governor, or it removes the gender from it in a way that doesn't seem threatening. So I think a lot of people will still wind up voting for it, as they did the first leg.
Right.
All right. So, we don't want to show any any prejudice, right? So, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with? The common law has always, considered he, and he refers to a person,
Sure.
not a male. So, if we're going to be more specific and make it more gender neutral, what's the harm?
I think the issue that could arise is something like you mentioned a bit earlier about altering culture and standards. And as we change the norm, then it starts to morph into whatever people want it to be.
Okay.
Right. So, and especially as we're expanding sexual orientation, et cetera, within code, as we're removing just these little instances, and that's not the only place. There's other places in code over the last couple of years that they've removed the term mother, for instance, to be birthing person.
Right.
So as we continue to do this, we start to shift the norm to allow for whatever.
So, okay, I'll ask you some questions, and then you can say, no, it's kind of crazy. But if we're going to be gender neutral about things, and then we're also going to create a standard for the pansexual, in order to normalize what I would consider deviant behavior. All right, my definition. Is there a problem when you constitutionally are protecting potentially deviant behavior now because of the way that they're drawing this up?
If it got to that point, and just to clarify your question, so if our Constitution is now shifted in a way that would overarchingly protect what's considered to be deviant behavior.
Because of how they're changing the definition of what a man and a woman is. And so that's number one.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to define what a man and a woman is anymore.
Yeah, I would say they're not changing it. They're just eliminating it.
They're just eliminating
Yeah,
it. Right.
We don't even need to talk about that.
And now we're going to go into gender neutral. So if we're not defining man and a woman and allowing these other so-called sexual preferences to be considered and allowed, and now we're making it all gender neutral, does that provide a constitutional protection for someone who today would be considered a pedophile, but tomorrow may not because they have all these protections?
I'd say that it's possible. As it is currently written, I don't see that being the case. But as we've seen over the last few
The
years,
expansion,
the expansion,
because you right, okay,
it's a constant expansion.
which is the point that I was getting to. So,
Right.
for instance, somebody who has been convicted of child molestation has there are certain restrictions as to what they can and cannot do, and their interaction with children. But if they're going to be constitutionally protected, those protections no longer exist.
Now-
Those restrictions.
The restrictions no
Yeah.
longer exist.
Correct. Now, but in order for that to happen, MAPS would need to be included within that sexual orientation definition, and that is not as of yet.
As of
As of yet.
yet.
Right.
So
Correct.
that's why I said, as written currently, no. But if we're continuing to expand this,
Correct.
then it definitely
It's,
does
it's, a,
leave.
it's
Well,
a
it's-
reasonable thing to consider.
Correct.
And it's not even like how it's written; it's how the courts in the future interpret it.
Sure.
And
Yeah,
we've
that's
seen
also very true.
our courts kind of change the way they do things lately.
And then you use, they just allowed this to happen. And so why can't we now allow this to happen?
Right.
Yep.
This isn't that much worse.
Right.
It's
It's
not
just-
that much
no.
different. So, like, you did that. Let's go with this too.
So we go way past what has been recognized for thousands and thousands of years. I'm a male and you are a female.
Imagine that.
How about that?
Oh no, there's been lots of cases throughout history that show when societies start going down this path, and then the results of that
Usually doesn't end well.
does not end well.
Correct. So, and the reason why I mention all this is because I think most people listening to this conversation would say, it's kind of crazy. But they're not aware that this is going on.
Yeah.
And then by the time it happens, it's too darn
It's
late.
late. And unfortunately, we have seen efforts to protect particularly minors within this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
There was a SB 55 that went up to the committee a few weeks ago, and that would protect minors from being able to sexually transition themselves while they're still minors. And it's bills like that are built to protect children that are being completely shut down. Absolutely.
So what is the status of that? I know my state representative, Eric Morrison, has been a proponent of that. So what is there any movement to do that?
So SB 55 to protect minors from sexual transition, there was a wonderful committee hearing. We had wonderful experts. One was a whistleblower from a gender clinic
Mm-hmm.
who she said, hey, I'm in a lesbian relationship. I'm a lifetime Democrat, And I worked in these gender clinics for years. But then I started seeing all the harm that was happening to these children. And this should not be a party issue. This should just be a protecting children issue. But she was completely ignored and downplayed.
Yeah, she testified, right?
She testified.
In front of Dover,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Absolutely. She had a great testimony, but that bill was pretty much dead on arrival.
Right. And
Just to again explain to people because they might not be as familiar with the legislative process here in Delaware, the bill was proposed, SB 55, to protect children.
Correct.
It went to this committee, and they have the first review testimony, and they make a decision whether this then goes out to the full Senate in this case, right?
Are you sure it was SB 55? I'm just looking it up. That says something about school access to epinephrine auto injectors.
For this legislature, or is that
Right.
a previous
got
legislature?
to be.
In the
There-
2020
because you can have
I'll
an
keep looking.
You can have an SB
Yeah.
55 in every legislature.
Yeah, you
okay,
can.
yeah, that was
Yeah, yeah.
2021.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, it said
He
2025.
should,
Yeah,
right?
and so
he should
so-
never question you.
and so in this instance, this went to this committee, and this committee said, "Nope, we think we have now decided that this should not be voted on or debated on and voted on by the broad Senate.
Correct.
Bill is dead."
Bill's dead.
Right.
Bill is dead.
So, do you think that one of the most consequential decisions a person could make would be to change their sex?
First, I'd say that it is impossible to change your sex.
Why?
As a former biology teacher, my degree's in biology.
Sounds like you're closed-minded.
Apparently.
Yes. And so, why can you not change your sex?
Because it is at the cellular level.
Correct.
At least it's not possible yet. They did just bring back the dire wolf. So
They did, right? Yeah.
They'd have to
So-
completely change you into an entirely new being.
Right. because
reprint you.
It's about
Got it.
the chromosomes and the DNA and all that other
Absolutely.
stuff.
Every single chromosome in your body is coded to build you a certain way, and a huge part of those building blocks depend on whether you have an X or a Y.
So if we could do that, would that change you?
If we could do that, if we could go in and change out the X for a Y in every single cell, including your teeth, your fingernails, your muscles, your bones,
Everything.
then yes,
Then you are a different creature.
correct. You'd be a completely different creature. You probably wouldn't even remember your name.
Yes.
You wouldn't have to make a new name.
And now I'm going to say something that might sound crazy,
Ooh.
and you tell me if it is crazy. But you now have this discussion about being able to allow minors to potentially make a decision to change their sex, gender, however that is, right? And we don't want to stop them from doing that or protect them from doing that as a minor. You want to do anything as an adult, knock yourself out, right? And then you have this other bill over here, which is around medical assistance in dying, physician-assisted suicide, which is around this idea of, I don't feel valuable anymore. I don't feel right. Something is wrong with me, and I don't want this life anymore. Is there some sort of connection between these?
I think so. Again, it's that personhood theory of this separation between your body and who you are. If my body is just a clump of cells, and I just happen to be a large clump of cells, then whether I decide to get a double mastectomy or whatever to completely change the way I look, it doesn't matter anymore.
So,
And if that doesn't work, because my value is not that I'm a man, I need to be a woman, and then that doesn't work, or you don't let me do it, or the government's not paying for it, well, then I have no value being here anymore.
and so you can go
I
ahead
feel
and
really weird.
you can kill yourself.
No, I'm not killing myself.
Oh, you're
I'm-
not?
I have a physician that's assisting me
Oh, I'm
in,
sorry.
in solving
I'm
my
sorry.
problem.
It's a totally different thing.
Yes,
Totally
totally.
Medical assistance in
totally
dying,
different. Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
So,
according to Canada.
so what other if we're going to start allowing children to not change their sex because it's physically impossible to do that, but to identify as a different gender and alter the appearance of their body to enhance that,
Mhm.
right? Transitioning, okay. If we're allowing them to make a pretty major decision, then should we not allow children to enter into contracts? Smoke.
You would think so.
Smoke.
Join the armed forces.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Drive,
I mean,
buy a gun.
yeah, by gun.
You don't have to go
Marry.
that far. We should let them get their ears pierced. A 12-year-old cannot go into a Claire's in the mall and get their ears pierced by themselves.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. But
That is a
Because
life-altering medical
that's
procedure.
body mutilation,
body. Oh, that's body.
right?
So
they
that's
they
wait a
can't
minute. Wait.
pierce their ears.
Wait. Getting their ears pierced is body
Right?
mutilation,
You're altering your body for forever.
but removing your sexual organs is not body mutilation.
Apparently, if it's not supposed to be there, then
Wow.
so it's grossly problematic.
It
you know,
is.
what we are allowing our young people to be able to decide. And in the hearing, one of the senators said this is not happening in Delaware, and I was completely floored when she said that because I very vividly remember I've seen the National Geographic cover for one of our sitting representatives who started the transition for her child as a minor.
Correct.
And it was paid for by Medicaid.
Yes.
And it was like the first in the nation.
Both her children.
And this
Right.
rep has transitioned one child?
No,
Too.
two.
Wow.
So I'm thinking it's not happening in Delaware, but there's someone right across the hall who I'm confused. Is it happening
yeah.
or is it not?
Yeah.
Right.
But yes, we're
That sounds like
allowing them to
gaslighting, actually.
allowing them to do that continually. And then HB 46 was another attempt to protect children. It would require parental consent for abortions for minors. Under the abortion and pregnancy laws in Delaware, minors are considered 16 and under. So at 17, they could, make pregnancy decisions on their own without parents. So this would only affect 16 and under and require them to receive some sort of consent before they have this, procedure that could change their lives. And that, again, was shut down completely in the committee hearing.
Is there legislation that's being introduced to legalize prostitution?
I've heard some rumblings.
I have too.
I haven't seen an official bill yet.
Okay.
I
I believe there was a state senator who has talked about this. She may be the one who's introducing that.
Yes, I've heard some rumblings.
That's how they're going to pay all those taxes, see, that they keep raising.
Yeah, if you tax it.
Well,
Well,
The
it's
oldest
funny. Okay,
profession.
so you're bringing up a specific topic of prostitution, right?
I am.
But
There's
okay,
a reason.
I was going to say, you're bringing up the idea of, hey, is there another bill? And one of the things that I've found when I was talking to Delawareans is they have no clue about just the sheer volume of bills that happen in Dover,
Yes.
right? So you've talked about SB 55, talked about the right to privacy, the right to abortion, changing the Constitution about this, that, or the other thing. I was going to say you talked about gay marriage. Is there another bill that's related to marriage in Delaware?
Oh, the first cousin marriage.
Oh wow,
HB
First
8.
cousin, yeah.
Yes.
oh yeah, HB 8. So just quick synopsis on that one.
Right.
What's that?
Well, if
Please.
you have married your cousin in another state somewhere else, it would completely recognize your marriage to your cousin,
First cousin.
first cousin,
First cousin. Yep.
right? So your parents' niece or nephew could marry them, no issue.
That's an interesting one because the root of that is
What's the root of that?
What is
Well,
the root of that?
there are other cultures who
Well, there are, but she's a biology major. Is there a reason why that's not a good idea?
oh sure
Oh, absolutely. The closer you get with the gene pool,
Correct.
the more problems. So you're looking at a very high rate of problems in children. The UK is actually in the process of discussing outlawing this because of the sheer number of children that they're having born with an array of medical issues, and they're seeing the common thread being
Exclusive of royalty?
I was going to say
Right.
there may be some family history in Delaware of similar sort of
May.
problems,
Right.
but I'm
Yeah.
not going to touch that any further.
No.
inbreeding leads to birth defects and
Absolutely. Yeah,
genetic
so
disorders.
So there's a reason why they have legalized you should not marry your first cousin is because of the biological aspects of that.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
Pakistan,
And it
right?
would be
That's a
the-
huge
the-
problem in Pakistan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what they're finding in the UK. Just to close
Right.
that loop
Right.
there.
They're the largest group that they're seeing these
Yep.
birth defects in.
So it's
was
not
they
really
have-
the royal family; it's
Right.
Pakistani
Correct.
immigrants to the UK. Is that
Correct.
sorry?
Yes.
Just for
Yeah.
Yes.
clarity of yep. Okay.
So just going back to my prostitution question, because there's rumblings that there's going to be a process to introduce legislation to legalize that. if we legalize prostitution and we are also allowing minors to be able to basically do all sorts of things, could your 12-year-old daughter say, I've decided to
trafficked?
become a prostitute because it's allowed to legalize and you can't stop me from my sexual preferences or sexual actions?
Well, it's definitely possible. I think if nothing else, it would protect child trafficking.
It certainly would.
So even if it wasn't the child's choice,
Correct.
right, and she is being trafficked or harmed, we've had several cases in the last just handful of months of school administrators and teachers, et cetera, who've been taking advantage of children.
Correct. In Delaware.
Several being
Delaware.
8.
8 in Delaware.
In Delaware. So if there is no parental consent, and this is happening to these young children, these young girls, they could foreseeably just have it completely erased. No one knows. There's no proof.
Right, because aren't there also rules either in place or being discussed that say that the school district won't discuss with the parent something about the child in the classroom related to gender or
Yeah, does that go-
pronouns and all
Does that
that
go
kind
to
of stuff?
privacy
Yeah,
issue?
yeah. There's some privacy things, especially at the regulatory level,
Mhm.
where parents are kind of left out of the conversation for a lot of things.
Wow.
So just in case the public is not aware of this, human trafficking is one of the largest international crimes that occurs. If you should see the Sound of Freedom, which was a great movie that talked about that aspect. The cartel has been making more money trafficking humans than they have drugs, because there's a great expense and there is a massive market for it. And I did some work in the planning for Super Bowl 48, which was when I was working up in the state of New Jersey with New Jersey State Police. And Super Bowls are one of the largest human trafficking events in the world. And you probably not aware of that, but there's a lot of money that comes into Super Bowls, and that happens. And so the human trafficking, sex trafficking issue is a massive issue, especially children. There's a huge market for children. And so you have to be aware that all
Hold
of
on.
this is
How
going
can
on.
the Super Bowl be a mass?
Because
human
there's
trafficking
so much
event?
money that comes in to the Super Bowl, and when they come there for the Super Bowl, they have an appetite for something and
So-
they want to buy it.
Okay, so people, I guess, with money going to watch the Super Bowl, going to
Correct.
the town where the Super Bowl is.
Yes.
There's other nefarious people bringing in entertainment, and that entertainment happens
Providing-
to be minors and
Yes, providing them their entertainment that
Slaves,
they
sex
want.
slaves,
And it
basically.
isn't just like prostitution, like like adults. It is children. Massive market for children. Yes.
So
in the Super Bowl.
At the Super Bowl, correct. Every Super Bowl. And since I was involved in the
I think I've heard that before, but
yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you because I firsthand
insane.
knowledge of it because I was involved in the security planning for Super Bowl 48. So, yeah, it is a huge issue.
Yeah.
And the fact that all of these things are going on, and we've only touched
Just a
scratched the
couple,
surface,
yeah.
and the public probably has no idea this is going on. And by the way, the Democrats are one House seat away from a supermajority, so they can do whatever they want. And
Super majority in both houses.
in both houses. They already have it in the Senate.
Right.
So they can do
and
whatever
then they can
want.
pass as many constitutional
Whatever they
amendments as
want.
they want. Yeah.
And I'm assuming that there's probably not too many Republicans who are supporting this type of legislation. If there are, maybe there are, we should call them out for it. But I'm assuming these are mostly Democratic
Yeah,
initiatives.
for all the bad bills that we've talked about, it's pretty much a partisan
Mhm.
split there.
Right.
And then there, on the flip side of that, there's a partisan split when it comes to not supporting bills like the one that would protect minors.
So the 55,
Correct. SB 55 and HB 46 for parental consent for minors, completely shut down by the Democrats. in
they were
committee.
introduced by Republicans.
Correct.
Were there any Democratic co-sponsors?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
And they never even got out of committee,
Correct.
which
Correct.
for everybody watching means a small group of people discuss them, right? I mean, a committee's typically what, maybe 5 to 7 legislators?
It's usually about 7 or 8 in the Senate side and about 14 or so in the House.
Oh, wow, that big. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Learn something. So that small group, smaller versus the broader House or Senate, they then make this decision. And if they say no, that bill sees no further advertisement, no further exposure, no further debate. You know, maybe
Correct.
maybe it's not the exact bill, but man, if it went to the bigger group of 41 reps, they could bang it into shape. They could add some amendments. They could, you know, add a little, take away a little, make it a better thing.
And the other,
No, it's possible for them to still bring it to the floor. There's a whole procedure that has to happen, and then they have to vote on it to say, would we like to take this bill that was tabled or defeated in committee and bring it to the floor? But that is also at the discretion of the speaker.
Right.
So there's still a lot of
right.
a lot of control.
Right.
And the other thing that's important to know is that the makeup of the committees are based upon who has the majority.
Correct.
So if the Republicans have the majority in the House and the majority in the Senate, then the majority of the committee members are Republicans.
Correct.
If the Democrats have a majority in the House and a majority in the Senate, which is the way it currently is now, then the majority of the members of the committees are Democrat.
Right. So the bill for SB 55, 7 members, 5 of them Democrat, 2 Republican. So there was absolutely no way to move it unless some of the Dems joined.
Right. So, okay. Wow. So,
any other bills that people should be aware of that are important to Delaware Family Policy Council?
I think those are the biggest ones that we're looking at right now. Almost every Friday, there's another set of bills that's filed. So there's always new ones that are coming up.
and we'll get the flurry as we get later into the legislative
Correct.
session. That's where they throw a lot of these out.
Yes, yes.
Because there's so much that comes out. So
Right.
Yeah, in terms of the legislative session, here we are on April 15th, and we have basically legislature meets Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and they have another week in April, I think, 3 weeks in May, 3 weeks in June.
Yeah.
So 9, 18, maybe another 20 to 23 days or something like that
right.
That's right.
of actual legislative
So
work.
hopefully this hasn't been too painful for you.
No, not at all.
And I would say that we would love to have you back in a couple weeks so that you can talk about any new developments. Would that be
Sure.
Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Couple Fridays from now, maybe get all those.
I'd say probably a little bit after that. They're about to go on a break for Easter.
Right.
So they're going to be a little quiet during that moment.
If I may, I think you want to wrap up, Jim. Is that right? Yeah, we've been at it
Correct.
for about an hour or so.
Yes, correct.
Last thing I want to bring up, which is not a bill, but it's terminology and a way of communicating that Nandi and DFPC have used that really changed my view on a lot of things, and I want to expose people to it. A lot of times we talk about politics. We sit here, we talk about conservative, liberal, we talk about Republican, Democrat, and a lot of people get turned off by that. I've heard you talk about this isn't politics, and keep me honest here. This isn't politics. This isn't about politics. This is about governing.
That's correct.
Can you touch on that a little bit? Why do you say it that way? What's the thought process there?
I think there's a very negative connotation that's been added to the word politics, that people automatically have a mistrust, or they will automatically say, oh, you're a Republican, or oh, you're a Democrat, when we start talking about issues. But we are a nonpartisan organization, first all. And government is something that even if you don't want to be involved in it, government is involved in you. If you never,
That's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
you never go to a voting booth ever in your life, there are still going to be decisions that are going to affect the home that you buy, or if you can buy, how your kids go to school, etc. Even down to the speed limit. It's all government, right? So having good stewardship of government is just something that every citizen should want to be involved in. And
They are involved in it, whether they like it or not.
right.
So
Involved in the process in some ways. And so we definitely want to, as I said, one of those 3 pillars of advocating is advocating for good policy, stewardship of government. And that's so much bigger than just politics. Politics can seem like a game, this person says that they're going to do this thing and they don't, etc. But it's beyond the political conversation. We want good government because that's when people are able to flourish.
And I appreciate you saying that. That I heard you say that last fall. It resonated with me. I used it with other people when I was running for office, and I think it really I'd say change the conversation, change the thought process. A lot of people will dismiss these bills depending on what side of the aisle you're on. Doesn't matter, right? Oh, that's a Republican bill, and I'm a Democrat. I don't want to listen to that or read it or consider it. Likewise, that's a Democrat bill. I'm a Republican. I don't want to consider it. But your point is it's about governance, and whatever bills get through and discussed and negotiated and passed, they apply to everybody,
That's
no matter
correct.
what side of the aisle you're on.
That's correct.
It's no longer a Republican introduced bill or a Democrat introduced bill. It is a signed piece of law
Right.
that we all follow.
Right.
And people really need to think about that. Is this piece of law, this piece of legislation good for us, good for me, good for our society, good for our state?
Right. And I think
Yep.
I would hope that it would open up people to being willing to have conversations with legislators or those that stand on the other side of the aisle that either have a red or a blue behind their names. Because even though we may see issues differently, we should still be able to have the conversation, because at the end of the day, we want good government.
Yeah, the conversation is the huge issue, and we have to not treat it as a zero-sum game, right? And speaking of conversation, probably one of the fascinating aspects that happened was Bill Maher went and had dinner with Donald Trump at the White House. And those are two.
He did a really good summary.
Yeah,
on
he
his
did.
show
He
about
did
that.
an excellent summary, and both took some crap because of it. But
Mm.
you can't talk to him. No, you can't talk to him. And it was kind of funny because Maher his staff had found 60 different negative comments that Trump had made about him over the years,
Yeah.
and put it on they printed it out and they showed it to Trump. And he laughed and he said, "I'd like you to autograph it." He said, "Okay, fine." So they autographed it and they showed it. So
I don't even think he asked Trump to sign it. I think Trump just signed it.
yeah, I mean, whatever, but he signed it. And so the key is they had conversation. And when they had conversation, Maher recognized he's not the personal man, is not the man that I knew. He's different,
Or
for
that he
whatever
sees
reason.
on the media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that conversation has to be there, and that conversation is what the founding fathers had required us to do, is that we should not have all power in one, because then you have a dictatorship.
Right.
You can have a dictatorship by majority. The intent was that we have to compromise and work together, so that we're not always going to get exactly what we want, but we work together to create something that we all can live with.
Yeah.
So, all right, the Delaware Family Policy Council,
DelawareFamilies.org.
DelawareFamilies.org. If anybody is interested in supporting or getting on to the mailing list, just go ahead and do that.
/updates.
Yep.
That's it.
Perfect.
We'll have that in when I post this up. That information will be in there. It's in the notes. And then love to have you back in a couple weeks. And if something happens and you say, "Hey, something just dropped, and I think it's really important," give us a call and we'll get together.
Sounds good.
How
All right.
do people get a hold of you if they want to send you anything?
If they want to email me directly, they can just go to my first name, Nandi, at DelawareFamilies.org.
Okay.
Nandi,
Awesome.
DelawareFamilies.org.
Thank you again for spending time with us, Nandi.
Yeah,
That's great.
thanks.
Being here.
Appreciate it.
And we'll see you a few Friday. Well, I guess we'll get past the Fridays, so you
Right,
have time to
right.
digest
Weeks,
all the
we'll
next
get
stuff coming out, and then
Right.
we'll see you soon.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And the first. Thanks.
In the first.